Bill de Blasio's recklessly dangerous agenda on crime will take us back to this. Don't let Bill de Blasio take New York backwards.
That old lady white-knuckling that subway rail said it all. At the Joe Lota spot here that's painting a beyond Thunderdome, New York, if de Blasio, when de Blasio is elected mayor. And since he's up by about 40 points in the polls, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves maybe, but I don't think by much. What will change under de Blasio, and what can and can't he really change? Forget about what he says on the campaign trail. Now, nobody expects stop and frisk to continue as is, especially given his promise to campaign issue, outstanding ruling against it by a federal judge, and the fact that its biggest fan, Michael Bloomberg, now leaving Gracie Mansion. Now, assuming again de Blasio wins, it means Police Commissioner Ray Kelly on his way out, but will we see an end to that type of policing that's been in place since the Giuliani administration? That should be the right up the alley, I should say, of our guest here, Kevin Baker, who in 2005 wrote America's Mayor, The Hidden History of Rudy Giuliani's New York. And I've heard a lot of debates back and forth. What's the cause and what's the effect? Yeah. Was it a good economy why crime went down? Was it stop and frisk, broken windows, that everything that came in? What's your sense? Because you've traced the historical arc.
Well, I think short answer is you had a whole bunch of unskilled, uneducated, poor people coming to New York, as they always had, and for the first time, there weren't entry-level jobs there.
Give an idea for time.
Circa 1955 to 75. Instead, there were a whole bunch of drugs and a whole bunch of guns. You know, so this is the big historical change. Also, the type of drugs contributed to things. You know, it can take a long time to drink yourself to death, and you can do it in a pretty cheap way. Things like crack just exploded the crime wave and made it much worse.
Yep.
You know, so you had this increase in policing. You had under David Dinkins, they brought 7,000 new cops onto the force. You had different patterns of policing, but most of all, the city came back as an attractive place to live.
You know, Dominic sat down recently with Mayor Dinkins, and he felt he's gotten a raw deal in history that the next mayor got the credit for something he put forward. Is that revisionist history, or is he more right than wrong?
No, I think I mean, look at the statistics. You know, the crime was plunging in double digits, percentage-wise, the last couple of years in Dinkins' administration. You know. Does that mean that he gets all the credit for this? No, no mayor does. But that had something to do with it. The idea that the city was out of control at that point, is an exaggeration.
So what's turned the city around under Giuliani and Bloomberg? Is it that there have been an explosion of low-skilled jobs for those people who you said were getting into trouble, or?
I think the city has continued to be more and more attractive to people to come back to from the, and frankly, things like crack went through the population that used it so quickly, and it wasn't an attractive drug. It wasn't something like heroin where you could be, you could take heroin and be playing jazz, but it was something that was just horrible. It looked horrible to people from the outside. It destroyed people very quickly.
We forget. I mean, I remember when my parents got out of the city in the early 70s when it was bad. And I think people look at Disneyland. I was going to actually say Times Square, they have no idea if they're under 35 what it was like here. You can't exaggerate the white flight that was going on and how you couldn't go above a certain street in New York here unless all of a sudden you were taking your life in your own hands. That was real, right? And is there any risk, you think, to going back on that if the new mayor comes in? I mean, that was the whole premise of the Lota campaign.
Okay, well, let's look at this for a second. And I like Joe Lota. So a new mayor is going to come in and say, let's take New York back to the way it used to be with high crime. It's not going to happen. He's going to bring in a police commissioner, whether it be Bill Bratton or someone else. They're probably going to bring back community policing. I could see de Blasio doing that, but it's not going to be much of a change. And they may stop and frisk, but it's going to continue, I guarantee you, but under a different type of name. So I don't envision, Richard, much of a change at all.
Tom's bulletproofing his car.
I mean, look, the reason that, as Kevin pointed out, and Dinkins does get credit because, the increase in the police, but the city always prospers when communities feel safe. when businesses feel like they can open business, when tourists at 50+ million a year feel like they can come to New York City and feel safe and secure. The one thing that Giuliani was, he put a face on, a tough face that sometimes as a parent we know. It's the same thing. You need tough love. You can't coddle the problem. You got to deal with it.
But with Giuliani, it wasn't tough love for everybody. It was tough love for some.
You know, Dominic, the thing that I find really remarkable after all this time, the people that succeeded the most under Giuliani administration was the African American community.
Right. You're alive. Let's start there. That was Rudy's line.
Okay,
right?
well,
I kept you alive. I may have
Dominic,
knocked your teeth out. I may have thrown you in jail for 3 weeks unwarranted.
Would you rather,
but black man, you're alive.
Would you rather have?
Or I will shoot at you 41
times. Would you rather? 41 times, you're going to say that one now, right? Seriously, that's
do
the
Diallo.
one. Diallo.
I'm going to do Diallo.
Maybe Diallo, if he had listened, he would have turned around, put his hands up, end of story.
If he had
but
listened.
listen, the bottom line is you're going to say Diallo? I mean, listen, that was a sad, unfortunate situation.
Wow.
And you're going to say somehow that's Rudy's tenure as Diallo?
Because
I mean, really,
Rudy
you're
said,
going to say that?
Because Rudy
Wait
said,
a second, Dominic,
Rudy sent the signal that green light to all the cops. Do what you want, I got your
Dominic,
back.
how many cases in a city of that size, you act like African American men were being shot on street corners? One is more than enough. But the bottom line is that property values in Harlem shot through the roof. Businesses shot through the roof. Kids weren't dying on the street. And that to you is, your answer is, oh, it was okay to punch their teeth out? That's ridiculous. Was your life better in Harlem in the 1970s than it was under Giuliani in 1995?
Let me ask a broader question, though.
That's ridiculous.
People have symbols from that time, certainly Diallo, Luima, but the squeegee guy, okay? And it was part of the broader thing, Kevin, of the broken windows, okay? Which was, we're not going to let people graffiti the subways anymore. We're not going to let, the petty crime stuff, because that's where, if you draw a line, you start to escalate what you stop. It still is in effect. It does work? Is that a fair thing or no?
There was a sense that the city was out of hand. Although I find cops, at least in my neighborhood, which generally a pretty good neighborhood but has some trouble spots, very unresponsive with regular day-to-day quality of life stuff. People on the corner turning over newspaper boxes, sitting on them, drinking or whatever. I can't get the local precinct to respond to that. So I find that kind of interesting.
Where is that?
On West 99th Street, 99th Street and Broadway. It drives me crazy. But beyond that, yeah, it was somewhat symbolic to get rid of the squeegee men. We can do this. The interesting thing to me is that Lota is missing the symbolism of stuff like de Blasio's. We'll have a small tax on the richest people to pay for universal pre-K. And Lota went into the debate and he said, you see, Governor Cuomo says this is already dead on arrival. Ha. That just emphasizes de Blasio's symbol, which is that it's a different symbol now.
Is there a worry, though, and I just have this, that de Blasio's resume, New York City is not easy to manage. We've seen people come in, we've seen people fail, and some others do better. But you need to have an organizational structure, and you need to have some experience. He's never been a deputy mayor even at any level. And my concern about it is, and even on the universal pre-K fund, he's not going to get the money to do this. He's got to go through the city again. It's not going to happen.
It's who he surrounds himself with, Richard. I mean, if he surrounds himself with strong deputy mayors, he will be fine. You need strong administrators. And that is, it's not necessary for a politician to have been able to run IBM and then come in. If you surround yourself with people who have the experience of running a big city, he will be fine.
Yeah. And that did surprise me, though, that Lota is trying to do this whole thing going back. First of all, if people feel they can't live in...
What other card does he have to play?
But, well, what he could have done was his own competence and his experience. Saying, oh, the crime's going to go back up. People who feel they can't live in the city anymore don't care that much about it. And secondly, it's not going to come back. I mean, look at how many more millions of New Yorkers now own their apartments. They're not going to just, unlike the renters of a generation before, they're not just going to go to Jersey when things get tough,
the affordability of the city, I've been waiting to hear more of in the campaign. I've heard the symbols, but we were talking about this yesterday. I can't remember a race where I know less that come November what really they plan to do and how they plan to do it. And I think that's been a victim here through this whole process. And maybe Mr. Weiner has something to blame for that. All right. We come back, we will leave politics. Many of you say, about time, Rich. But we're going to be talking about a subject the 5 of us love, well, the 4 of us love and Dominic likes, and that is baseball. All right, and we've got the right guy to talk about this. If you like Ken Burns, you got the right guy. If you like Reggie Jackson, we got the right guy. We'll be back with this and a few Yankee fans and Andrew. All right, stay with us.